Greetings and welcome to another episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. I'm your host, Scott, and with me as always is my awe-inspiring co-host, Caleb. Caleb, it's another intro with another adjective to describe you. Did I get it right this time?
Yeah, I don't know if awe-inspiring is the right phrase. You might just be just noise-inspiring I don't know if people can hear it in the background, but man, the kids are being loud. So noise-inspiring would maybe be the better term.
Fair enough. Well, try and turn them down, please.
I can't. We have the joke in our household all the time that it's like they'll be like, "Sorry, Dad, I know we were loud," and I'm like, "Guys, it's a house, not a recording studio. You're allowed to live here."
That's true. You're a good dad, too. This is my co-host, Good Dad Caleb. That's what I'm going to say from now on. We're back again to talk about the experience of growing up as youth group kids in the 90s and how that has shaped our adult lives. We'll talk to old friends about their faith journey spanning from the 90s to today and discuss current cultural topics through the lens of someone who grew up during that era. Caleb, who do we have on deck today?
I had to remember. We talked to Kylan, who Kylan Savage from Church Jams Now is probably what the best way to introduce him. Yep. He is one of the hosts of the Church Jams Now podcast, and I've gotten to know Kylan the last couple of years online, just through Twitter, talking about music, talking about a lot of Christian music, other music as well, and so we had thrown out the idea of looking for guests, and he was interested, and it was great to have him.
Yeah, he was a really fun conversation. Having listened to that podcast quite a bit, I was like, wow, I'm going to get to talk to this guy and, get to see him put a face to a mic per se.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of really intriguing things to say, all of which kind of surrounded around what it was like for him being so involved. He was really, really involved. His mom was really involved. And then, like you said, music was a big deal for him too. So I found his interview here to be pretty darn genuine.
Yeah, I thought it was great. It was not only some really introspective and serious moments that he kind of was talking through, but there was for me there was a couple of laugh out loud moments as well. Like it just had a lot of those things that you want when you talk to somebody. You hear stories that are both serious and fun, and like you got a little bit of both in there, and it was just great. I just thought the genuine nature in which he answered these questions was really great. And it was a real insightful look into somebody's experience and how I'm gonna say it, how you can have good and bad. And you can still look back at them with, and learn something from the experience, even if it had a little good and a little bad.
Yeah, I appreciated the fact that he was able to say there were things that I was very embarrassed about, or someone embarrassed me about, but I can see why it was done or that sort of thing. It didn't seem like he held too much of a grudge, but considering what you'll hear here in a few minutes, might be like, yeah, I'd still be a little bit mad if that happens, but he is able to kind of step away and be like, I understand why it happened. So I appreciated his sincerity there.
Yep.
So.
He also made a couple comments that were just like really made me think deep and even made me kind of look at my own life and my own experience. So I thought that was really cool. There's a comment he makes about anger that is just really, really, really insightful, I think. And I think it's something that a lot of us have felt. And so he really articulated that as well. He articulated that really well. So that was really great to hear.
I think articulates the right verb there. He was very, very articulate about it and explained it really well. And it was refreshing to talk about that in particular. So, Kylan, thank you very much for joining us. We're fans of your podcast. You're nice enough to say you're a fan of ours too. We thank you for being a good support of our little show here. Like Caleb said, if you haven't listened to Church Jams Now, we both recommend it. It's a really good listen. Go check that out on your podcast device or wherever you listen to it. At any rate, thank you very much for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Okay, we are joined here this evening by our friend Kylan. Kylan was very kind to be willing to talk about his youth group experience with us, and he is no stranger to the podcast space. So, this is a quick and easy setup for us. But we look forward to find out more about your journey. So, Kylan, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're fans of your show, and I've heard you've listened to a couple of our episodes, so this will be a
I
good.
have I've listened to a lot, man.
Nice.
I'm a very big fan of your
Thank you.
show.
Thank
So,
you. I never thought when I started this anybody'd say I'm a big fan of the show.
yeah,
So here we are. We made it.
Caleb is very well aware of how much I just want to be on any show that he's involved in. I think I want it too much. All I want to do, I'm trying really hard to just find a way where I can just podcast with Caleb all the time.
This sounds like either a podcast empire or a spinoff. Something's happening here.
We got to start the birthday podcast, which is an inside joke that only
Amen.
about 5 people will get.
Yep, that's for literally 5 people.
Well,
AJ, that was for you.
I hope you 5 are listening, and I hope you laughed. So, well, let's start from the beginning. Kylan, just kind of tell us about your upbringing. You know, that's kind of where we always start. Did you grow up in a Christian home? And how did you start interacting with youth group in the 90s?
Yeah. Okay, so I've been thinking about how to respond to this since y'all first invited me on. I'm a little bit younger than y'all. So my prime youth group years were actually in the 2000s, like the early 2000s. But my family has been involved in like youth ministry since I was born.
Oh.
So my like primary like youth group in the 90s experience was like, I mean, even though I was a lot younger, I was at every youth group. So I grew up hardcore Southern Baptist in Texas, and I get the sense now that I didn't really get then, like my mother was super called to like youth ministry.
Okay.
And she was, but like never in a position where she could like actually be a youth pastor. But like I can tell now, like my mom wanted to be a youth pastor. So she was always like super, super, super involved with youth group activities. Mm-hmm. So like we always had like teenagers coming in and out of our house, like when I was growing up. And then like once I got old enough to actually be in youth group, it was right around the time like I started learning guitar. And so I got involved in like youth worship. I do have to say, your 2-part episode with Tim was awesome. I loved that. I related to like so much of that.
You were in the worship part of the band and everything? And
I was like from a very, very, very early age. Yeah, like started youth bands, and like that was because when I actually got into youth group, I was like a weird outsider kid, and we can get into this later. I'm gonna try really hard. I just have to preface this by saying I'm gonna try my hardest to not treat this like therapy.
No. You've heard us say it. This is free therapy, so feel free.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much time you guys have. I feel like I might owe you some money after all of this, so I'm gonna
Finally,
try.
We make money on it, Caleb.
Yeah. I'm going to try really hard. But yeah, I mean, like youth group stuff has been in my life, like since I was born, basically. Mm-hmm.
So your mom really kind of wanted to be at least a leader, if not involved, and that kind of trickled down to you. She probably, I'm assuming, didn't have like crazy opportunity to be a youth pastor in Southern Baptist in Texas, but at least they'd probably take her help. And
yep.
I'm sure as a young kid watching that, you're like, oh, wow, I want to be involved in this too.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
How did then like faith look for you in the 90s? Look like for you, let's say in the 2000s? Mm-hmm. You said you played in worship band, that sort of thing. Like, how were you actively leading in your youth group? How much were you participating?
I was after a certain point. So I mean, for me, the faith aspect was like always like I was very certain of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like I got saved when I was 4, I got baptized when I was 5. It was like, this was it was just like it was such a part of the culture in which I was raised, right? Like these were things that like had to happen. And then I picked up a guitar and I started playing. And then right when I was around like 13 or 14, I started like a little worship band for like the middle school.
Nice.
There's always like a weird little like subsection of the youth group for the middle school kids.
Yep.
So I started leading worship for that, and then started leading worship for like the main youth group, and then moved on into college until eventually I was like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Actually went to college, or went to a worship school for a year, the Ocean's Edge Worship Academy, associated with Calvary Chapel in Fort Lauderdale. And then, this was like my whole life was like, I'm going to like lead worship for youth group.
Why not? I mean, I think every youth group has a band now.
Yeah.
Maybe except for my sons, but like we've talked about that trajectory too a little bit. At some point that was kind of all right. That's a staple of the youth group experience, is
right.
And we didn't have that, but that seems to be something that was maybe a turn of the century type of thing. So during that time of you kind of growing up and expecting to just continue to be part of youth ministry, like what are some things that stick in your brain about that experience? Is it some teaching, some, retreat, or some conference you went to? Like, what are some of the big highlights for you as a youth?
When I was in middle school, so we had moved to Florida, and my entire family was like incredibly involved with the ministry of the First Baptist Church of Fort Lauderdale, which is a like massive mega church. Like they put on a Christmas pageant that they put on for like 25 years that cost like, $100,000 to put on. It like got broadcast to 16 different countries, all this stuff. And that church had money. And so like I remember being involved in that youth group, and like even being a little bit younger, like being able to like perform like for the older kids in the youth group, and for like for big church, as we called it, for all the grown-ups. We had a little group called Extreme Examples, and both of them started with an X.
Yes,
this is like so like
Yes.
Extreme Examples is like the most, like, I think this was like right around the time that Extreme Days came out. It was like, everything in like 2000 was like extreme. So
I can visualize the large X going across the
CD
cover.
For sure. For sure. And like we got to play for like all of these people, and it felt really cool. We had t-shirts made, which was pretty rad.
Whoa.
I still have one. This says Extreme Examples, and it does have a Bible verse. I do not remember what it is. Yeah, so like that was sort of like a taste of community that I didn't get elsewhere. Specifically at that time, I was homeschooled for a brief period of time, and I wasn't getting community anywhere else, but I was getting it like from and specifically the older kids, like in the youth group.
Okay.
Like everyone thought I was cool, and that was like, that's cool for a little weirdo kid in South Florida.
This kid can hold his own with us.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh yeah, he can play bumper pool, because we had one of those youth rooms that had like, it had foosball, it had bumper pool, like it had all the things. So
yep. We didn't have bumper kid. We had foosball, and John had a pinball machine. So just something you can goof around on. So
yeah.
Any other memories you want to share? That sounds like a good one. You want to balance it out with a bad one?
Sure. I have a really bad one. So whenever we moved to Northwest Arkansas, so I had been homeschooled for about 4 years, and we started going to a church. We started going to the Church of Pinnacle Hills, which is now called Cross Church. It's another mega church. The head pastor is Pastor Ronnie Floyd, who was the head of the Southern Baptist Convention for a number of years.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so I simultaneously started going to public school and started going to like a new youth group at the same time.
Mm.
My mom immediately like got involved, was like basically second in command in the youth ministry. And okay, so my mom is like an incredibly outgoing, gregarious, like type A personality, like very much the type of person you want in charge of like a youth ministry. I am very much the opposite. I am very much like an introverted weirdo. So I have two memories from when we got involved in that youth ministry, because everyone specifically that was involved with that was like, this was right around the time that like ultimate frisbee started to become like a huge thing. So like everyone was playing ultimate, and everyone was like an athlete, like, you know, and they were all friends from school outside of the youth group. And I come in, the youth group is like my only hope for like a social life. And I come in, very first night I'm there, the youth pastor, you know, we do like a round robin kind of thing. He's just like asking, he's like, okay, everyone, Kylan's new here, like everyone say your name and say something cool about yourself. And it comes around to me, like everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm Rob, I'm the captain of the football team or whatever. And then it comes around to me and I'm like, hi, my name is Kylan. I deciphered the entire Dwarvish runic alphabet from a map that J.R.R. Tolkien drew in the beginning of The Hobbit, to just like crickets. And I was like, oh, okay, these may not be my people. So I would just like immediately got labeled as like the weird kid.
Super nerd or something.
Yes, exactly. So then about like a year later, so I know you guys have talked about like traumatic youth group games on your show. My worst youth group memory is associated with that. So once again, you know, my mom was like in charge of everything, and she did. So, I mean, I was in 9th grade, right? Which is like the worst time to try to socialize with other human beings. And they did one of those games. So my mom was like on the stage. There's like probably 100 kids in our youth group. And they do one of those games where they blindfold everybody and you have to smell something and like guess what it is.
Oh, no.
And so they go up on stage, and my mom had taken a pair of my tidy whities and smeared chocolate syrup all over it. Like,
dude.
Like, this is what I'm saying. I'm trying not to treat this like therapy.
I'm full of dread just listening to this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm already like the weird Lord of the Rings kid. My mom doesn't realize, like the fact that I'm there every week doesn't mean that I'm like friends with everybody. Like in her mind, oh, they're all just kids, right? They're all friends.
Sure.
She takes a pair of my tidy whities, smears it with chocolate syrup. Someone goes to sniff it and she rubs it in their face, right? And smears it all over their face. And then they take the blindfold off and they're like, oh, look, it's Kylan's tidy whities. And I'm mortified. I like have a panic attack and leave the building. And my mom to this day still does not understand why that's not the funniest thing that's ever happened in youth group.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
So that question we usually say for the end. We will not edit that to the end. That's just I apologize on behalf of all the extroverts out there. Like, that's it.
It's fine, man.
That's intense, man.
It's traumatic, but I at this point I can also I can see the humor in it, right? But there is something to be said about youth group culture around this time, not really being accessible for introverted people.
Yeah.
Yep. I am married to a lovely introvert, and I have, we'll be together. We've been together for a long time, over 20 years, and it's taken a long time for me just to kind of understand how that dynamic works, right?
Right.
If we were two introverts or two extroverts, it'd be different.
Right.
But I think in that regard, youth group is inherently an extroverted thing. That
Yes.
is how
Yeah.
it was established. That's kind of the ethos of drawing kids in as let's
Right.
be wild and crazy and everyone will just have fun, quote unquote. But I think probably a little too late to your group or maybe to the Southern Baptist group, but understanding the difference between introverts and extroverts is
Yeah.
really is maybe not intentional fault per se. It's not like they were
Right.
actively ignoring it. They were just like, hey, we
Exactly.
don't understand this. This is not part of the conversation. And like you said, a lot of youth pastors just think, oh, kids are kids. They like all this stuff. And
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's been the big thing I've been thinking about since you guys asked me to come on the show and I got the questionnaire and stuff. I was working through a lot of stuff and really kind of focusing on youth group culture in a lot of ways. I think it was really good for a specific personality type that I didn't necessarily fit in with,
Yeah. There's also something to be said about the idea of your that personality type leading to how you perceive others and how you perceive people. My personality doesn't lead me to believe that oh, everybody here is friends. But I can totally see where my wife totally could do that. My wife
Right.
would totally perceive oh yeah, everybody's hanging out and they're all friends. And so it's just, this is all just in good fun. And so there's that, even that personality type, right? Introverted,
Right.
extroverted, or just
Yeah.
how you perceive other people as I'm always going to be cynical and untrusting, where
Right.
it sounds like your mom much more of very trusting. And there's good and bad with both sides of that spectrum.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that immediately led to me just then I mean, there's no way within a high school social hierarchy that I'm coming back from that, right? So it's just
right.
but I still want to be involved. So I get involved in the media team and then get involved in worship. So then it's I can still be involved, but there are parameters, right? I'm either on stage for this certain amount of time or I'm running the sound for this and I have my specific job, and I think there is something to be said about the sort of the operations aspect of youth group that does still allow kids that feel like they don't fit in to fit in,
Yeah, discover what roles could be filled in certain aspects of the entire group, and you can make it function even better.
Right.
The only other thing I was thinking about as you were describing this experience is, I don't know about you, but Caleb, there was a big emphasis on getting outside your comfort zone, and I get that, but go on a missions trip, get outside your comfort zone, that sort of thing, and there's a place for that, right?
Yeah.
But I feels a little targeted towards introverts, right? That kid's quiet. Go make them talk.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe the kid just wants to be left alone.
Right.
And I distinctly remember trying to, whether it was a new kid or just a kid who traditionally was not as active or over the top as someone like me, trying to go over to him and, hey, let's dance or let's have a good time together or whatever. And kid's like, no, I don't want to do that. And the goal was you must not be having fun.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
there's a little, maybe in that at that time with the handbook that all these youth pastors were reading or the school they were going to, there wasn't maybe a ton of child psychology behind it.
Right. Yeah. It's like you're either dancing or you're not having fun. And a big goal of youth group was to like have fun.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, maybe we have fun in different ways.
Right.
I'm so curious. Like, I don't know, like, because I don't have any experience with like youth groups and stuff now, like just where I am in my life. I'm curious if that culture has like changed at all, or if it's still sort of like pretty like extrovert centric.
Heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, Kale, both our kids are in youth group. If my son was up, I'd get him down here to answer that question. He's 13, so he's like right in the middle of it.
Right.
They got a gym. They play their games. I just don't know. I think it would be more of a understanding that some of those kids need that space, right? And it's okay for them not to do the crazy thing and not to participate or not to come up on stage for a game. Like,
Right.
I think as far as I know from the leaders that at the church we go to, like they understand that dynamic a little bit, a lot more than we ever did. So, but yeah, I mean, there's still the point of like, well, they must not be having fun. They're not going to come back. It's like, no, some kids may not come back because you pushed them too far.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is going to be a weird comparison. I think it feels a little less like extreme, out of control, like embarrassing things. And it feels a little bit more like, at least our youth group that we're in, it feels a little bit more like summer campy. Like the games are a little more innocent because like, so they'll do like big icebreakers, but it's just like everybody plays paper, rock, scissors till you get a champion, or something like that.
Right.
It's less like extreme make fun of it or extreme embarrassment or, those sorts of things, and just more like kind of like it feels like a summer camp game instead.
Right.
And I do think there's a bit of a worry of you embarrass somebody, they really don't like it. All of a sudden you're on Facebook and you're in the news.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
So I think there is just a certain level of like, nope, we're going to tone it down because we do have to be more careful. So I think there just might be more of a cultural realization that like, we need to be sensitive to some things. So that's my feeling. But I have two very, very introverted children. And I get it. Because I'll ask them, did you have a good time? And the response is usually, it was fine. And I can't tell if they liked it or not. I have no idea. Right. And sometimes it's fine, because the answer is always it was fine. Right. And sometimes it was fine, and I can tell they liked it. And sometimes it was it's fine, and I don't think they actually liked it all that much. So.
Right. Yeah.
And there's no dancing happening in my family.
The various levels of it's fine.
Yeah.
Parenting 101.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap up the conversation about like, young Kylan and back in the 2000s. Just in general, what did you love about being in youth group during that time?
I'll go back to like, okay, so like after those sort of traumatic moments, I want to focus on again, like, I got involved with the media team, and then I got involved with like worship on stage, playing bongos because I couldn't play another instrument, and then like just like having opportunities to grow as a musician. I think it really led me down a path of like becoming a lifelong musician. I think like it put me in a lot of positions where like I would show up for youth group and I would have no idea what songs we were going to play. Right. So you have to learn to improvise a little bit. Like it taught me a lot of skills that I still use in my life to this day. right? Like whether in music or in my day job. For the longest time, I was really bitter that I wasn't like part of that sort of like main group. But then I did find my place in like within the background guys. And I love kind of like being a background guy, right? Like I found a lot of things and grew a lot of skills from that experience.
That's cool. That's a good reminder that like not everyone wants to be the front man or whatever.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's perfectly fine, and that makes things work even better once people understand that about themselves and about what the group or the band needs or whatever. So all right, well, let's kind of jump into the next part of the journey, which is in general, like compared to what you had back then, is your faith the same or is it different? How has it changed?
It's very different. I'm so excited to hear this episode when it comes out because I'm so excited for the disclaimer.
I want to break in and quickly remind everyone that the views and opinions expressed on this episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s may not be held by or even approved of by everyone appearing on this episode. One of the goals of this show is to give everyone a safe space to share their opinions and thoughts on deeply personal matters of faith. We are not looking to start an argument, but instead we want to let people share how they feel. During our interviews and discussions, we may not represent every point of view on a given subject, and we understand that this may be frustrating at times, but it is the nature of a podcast discussion with a limited amount of time. We also know and want to acknowledge that our memories of events that happened 25 to 30 years ago may not be 100% accurate. We assume everyone's best intentions as they share how they remember the experience of their youth. Now, back to the show.
Do we have to do 2 disclaimers? Should we put the disclaimer again right here?
Yes. Please do, for my sake. I'm so excited to just hear it again. I love when I hear it multiple times in an episode. Like, just a reminder. My faith is so different than it was then. Like, I've talked about this like a little bit on other podcasts. I ended high school kind of like at an impasse of like, am I going to pursue a degree in theater or am I going to follow God's calling to like be a worship pastor?
Mm-hmm.
Both of those things inherently are ridiculous. But I decided to go with worship pastor. And I went to school for that, and then I went to Dallas Baptist University for music business. Mm-hmm. And then got involved like with a couple churches and stuff and kind of got screwed over by a lot of people. Working within churches that I got really, really, really angry about that, which, I feel like that's kind of the typical story, right? Of people like grew up within like a faith tradition and then get out on their own, realize how maybe they were like taken advantage of in certain aspects and then just decide to throw away the entire thing. Mm-hmm. And then like in recent years, like I've been trying to figure out like, is that anger worth it? Like, is it worth it to hold on to that every day and to just like continually be bitter because some stupid pastor in Arlington, Texas, like screwed me out of my taxes or whatever, is there something bigger beyond that? Like can I look past, you know, learning how a 4, 5, 6 chord change can like emotionally manipulate people, and all we're doing is manipulating people? It's like, well, okay, I mean, that's all music, you know. So I've kind of come around. I don't know where I'm at currently, but I'm a lot more open. I will say, like, I'm going to church with my wife and my daughter. Like, we found a local church that we really like. I'm kind of coming back to a place where I'm like, I'm open to a lot of things. I'm still like a little cynical, specifically about like scriptural interpretations. But I can find a lot of good in being around other people regularly, like striving for the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think the community aspect of church is an appealing one, even to an outsider, as long as it's not, a click and shut off.
right. Well, because that was my entire experience my whole life, right? Like
Yep,
as a child, I was always told like, no, this is like the most important thing, but then there were always cliques and I was always on the outside of it.
Yeah.
So, you know, as an adult, like being able to look past a lot of that and like kind of push through and understand that like not every place is like that, like has been a big deal for me.
Yeah.
The anger comment you gave was interesting to me because I can identify with that. I didn't get screwed out of money or anything like that, but there's been interviews we've done where it's like, man, some of these things over time just feels like a lot of stuff that we were taught back then by these people who were so convicted and trying to
Right.
convince us to turn our life over to something feels a little bit of a betrayal when certain things have happened.
Yeah.
And Kayla and I have talked plenty about our cynicism, and God bless my wife for sticking through it with me, because I can be a really cynical person. And it's like I've also come to that point recently too, where it's like, man, I'm just kind of tired of being angry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it serves a purpose. Like it helps me be hyper analytical and
Yeah.
hypercritical in a good way of like, let's parse this out and dissect it. But then
Right.
at another point, it's just exhausting, and it not hasn't always had the fruit that I thought it would.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's helped me a lot. You know, I think just finding people that are excited about their faith and like really believe it. Like I feel like I became so cynical because I saw a lot of like hypocritical behavior within churches and so, and specifically like being raised Southern Baptist and seeing a lot of like, and like going to like a lot of mega churches and stuff, like seeing all of that, I was just like, well, okay, no, this is all ridiculous. But now, you know, like I'm going to like a Methodist church that is super welcoming to all people and are like it's a group of people that I see are like genuinely trying to live out the things that they believe, and I'm just like, oh, hell yeah, I want that too. Like, yeah, no, this is exactly what I want. Yeah, no, it's been a nice change of pace for me.
Yeah, even that comment about like just trying to do real life together, like that's a phrase that was always said about like small groups, do life together, that kind of thing. And
Right.
there's a little bit of that youth group showmanship about it, like, hey, we're just going to be enthusiastic, we're going to have fun the whole time. And it's like, well, as you get to be an adult and life comes at you pretty quick and things change, like all you're really looking for are people who can be honest about what their faith looks like, no matter what it looks like, without
Right.
being too antagonistic towards someone else about it. And I
Right.
think that's drawing some people back in when they
Yeah.
can find those communities, and they usually happen in smaller settings. But look, man, we've been a part of a couple of churches where the leadership has just failed, and you realize like the people running it behind the scenes they're just people.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Yeah. Yeah.
special about
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
They may have studied a little bit more and had
Right.
some training, but dude, they're gonna make mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of my like cynicism, was because then I kind of like got involved in the system. Right? Like I was doing a lot of like behind the scenes stuff. Like I was a worship pastor at a church for a number of years, and then like having meetings with like the church like admin people and seeing this as like a business.
Yeah.
At a certain point I was just like, okay, like, they're so worried about like the amount of people we have each week, like what that comes down to from a monetary perspective. And then like getting mad at me because like I wore a hat on stage or did like half of a U2 song at the end of a hymn. I was just like, why, like, I feel like we're focusing on the wrong things. So
Yeah, there can be some of that.
How long of a gap was it? Because you said come back to church. I'm assuming there was some gap of just not being at all involved in. So go from worship pastor to like a pretty big gap, right?
Yeah. I mean, so we just started going to church again this year. So 2024, I left my last like ministry position in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah, so you're pushing 15 years almost.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's cool that you kind of have been able to at least kind of dip your toe back in there and say, hey, we'll see how this works, and still give it a chance, because, I know I've been tempted to just be like, I'm out of here.
Well,
After
yeah.
coming
Yeah.
back.
I mean, that was
It's such
yeah.
a temptation there, and something about it just kind of keeps us connected.
Yeah. But I was so done. Like I had my Hershey's chocolate smeared trousers and getting screwed out of taxes. Like I had so much stuff built up that I was just like, yeah, no, I don't need this at all.
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to kind of like circle back to that. Starting out, like realizing how important it is for my wife and for my child, and like being a little bit aloof about it. Like, yeah, okay, like I understand this is important for you. I'll try this, and then to like recognize that some of this is like important for me as well.
I'm curious, as an adult, maybe even outside of the church context while you were away for a while, I guess, but was there a major impactful life event that kind of made you maybe kind of steer back towards considering, going back into a church building at some point?
Yeah, no, it fully was my daughter being born. So I remember January of 2020, my wife and I being like, okay, this is the year that we're just going to accept where we are in life. Like we're nomads a little bit. We like to move a lot. We're just like, okay, we're going to be comfortable with where we're at. She tells me she's pregnant on like the last week of February. The first week of March, everything shuts down. And we're just like, what is going on? So, had the entire pregnancy, entire birth, like everything, like completely isolated. And then, there's a little bit of like a residual, like, yes, we can still do this for like a couple years. And then it hits and we're like, I don't think we can do this by ourselves. And then, your kid gets a little bit older and you realize like all of these things that were like really important to you growing up, right? Like, I I had a certain moment where like I realized my 3-year-old didn't know the song "This Little Light of Mine." I'm like, why does she not know that? Like that's like a song every 3-year-old knows.
Right.
And then it kind of hit me like how important all of those sort of like community aspects are, and like how important that was to me growing up. But I was still like a little bit cagey, right? Like going back into that. And then it's just sort of like developed from there, right? Like we start to do research of like local churches and find a place we think we're comfortable with. We go there, we're not comfortable there. And then we try another place, and then we do feel comfortable there. So, yeah, I mean, it really was like my daughter getting older and trying to share this like almost cultural and historical aspect of like who I am with her that has kind of like led me to where I am now.
That's great. That's a common answer for a lot of people, right? All of a sudden, I mean, kids turn your life upside down in unknown ways. You just don't know until it happens. You can't describe it. And I think this is a way for a lot of people where it's like, maybe I should do that.
Yeah.
Or go back.
When you were like walking into, this church that you guys ended up at, did you have any conversations with the pastor about like, yeah, I'm a little skeptical of all this. Like, has that sort of stuff come up with anybody or with people?
Okay. So here's a fun story. So we're currently going to a FUMC church. They're the ones that like broke away or didn't break away from the Methodist Church.
Yep.
Fun fact, like the first time we decided to go to church again was actually, I think it was June 1st. I think that was a Sunday. So it was the first weekend of Pride Month, and the worship pastor wore a t-shirt with a rainbow on it that said "All are welcome here." They sang Chris Tomlin and Matt Redman, and my wife, who has a gluten intolerance, when they started communion, they said, "Everyone is open to God's table. We have gluten-free options." And I looked at my wife and was like, I guess we go to church here now. like, I guess, is this our church? Like, it seems like it. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Just seeing people like actively live out their faith in ways like almost like a movie. Like no one has to necessarily like verbally defend anything. It was just like those like little touches that felt really human and like felt like real people living out their faith that kind of pulled me in.
I wonder if there's a part to that of all the mega church stuff you had when you were younger. I've said it before. We tried, after we moved, we tried a couple of mega churches, and my son just didn't connect. There's too many people, and it was too programmed, and it was all about like, on youth group we do this, and this, and even amongst a youth group of a couple hundred kids, they would separate them out into smaller groups, but it just never worked. Like there's less capacity for actually trying to make a connection.
Yeah.
And so you have that in your background, then all of a sudden it's like, well, break time, let's come back to it, and we can actually find something smaller. Yeah. Maybe those types of smaller churches weren't just functioning that way back in the day.
Yeah. I think so. Like one of the biggest things too with the church that I'm at now that's like kept me around is like their worship team is okay. They're not great. And, coming from like mega church where like everything is a production, right? Like you have like, you not only have a sound guy, you have a light guy, you have like it's a full like U2 arena level production for like every service. To hear these people like trying to do a song and then having to like stop halfway through because the female singer is like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have the right key in my head." Right? And like everyone's like kind of struggling for some reason. Like as a musician, like it's horrifying to me, but there's like a level of reality, like it kind of grounds me a little bit, that I'm just like, oh, okay, it like they are really trying, and I appreciate that more than sounding great, more than like all of the guitar rigs and the digital mixing and all of the things you could do. Like I appreciate, like I felt closer to God in that moment than I did, standing in a pew with like 1,000 other people listening to someone sing the words hallelujah 6 times in a row, right? For
Amplified
8
a
minutes.
billion times.
Yeah, exactly.
It got an authenticity bop is what that service got.
Yes, 100%. Authenticity bop for days.
As we said, this is therapy, so now it's confession time. Did you ever go up to, or have you gone up to that worship team and been like, "Hey guys, do you need some bongo drums?" Like,
well,
come on
okay.
now.
If
bongos, I'm so shocked by bongos.
No, I know. Well, okay. Anyone that's listening to this that has listened to any of my other shows know that I hate bongos. There's a reason for it. This is my bongo hatred origin story.
This is an exclusive.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Has this ever been told on Church Jams Now?
No.
Oh my goodness.
This is a scoop
Breaking news.
for you guys. I hate bongos because I played bongos. No, I haven't. I've wanted to multiple times. Specifically, one time, the guy that plays drums in the band at the church we go to has a similar body type to me and similar facial hair and always wears a hat. And one day my daughter was like, "Is Daddy playing drums on stage?" And I'm like, "No, baby, I'm right here." I have wanted to. I have not, because I also have an aversion to overextending myself for like volunteer work within a church. But, it may happen.
You've done quite a bit of that.
Yes, a lot. Like my entire life. Like
yes,
my whole life has just been like, no. You're going to spend Tuesday rehearsing, Wednesday youth group, Thursday, Friday, Saturday rehearsing, Sunday morning, Sunday night, like the whole thing.
Yep. And rinse and repeat. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you spent a lot of time with us. Well, let's ask a few more questions here. Just in general, like this one, I always really like because I think it gets into both mindsets. Like, what would your younger self say to yourself now, and what would your, adult self, dad self, say to your youth group self?
My younger self, I think, would say to my current self. Okay, fun fact. Do you guys know who Brandon Lake is? He's like
He's
huge.
a worship guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to worship school with Brandon Lake.
Oh, okay.
So I think my high school self would say to my current self, "Why are you not touring with Brandon Lake and Creed right now? Why are you not
Fair.
opening for Brandon Lake?"
Very fair.
My current self would say, "Listen, you can love music. You don't have to pretend that it's your calling. You can just enjoy it to enjoy it. And that is just as important. Like, you don't have to pretend that worship music is what God has called you to do just because you enjoy doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there is space for that, but I don't think I necessarily felt that at that time. I think I was using the language that was given to me to justify doing something that I loved. And then it kind of became like an obligation. It's like, just do this because you love to do it.
That's a great answer. I like that very much. I'm going to parlay that into a question not on the script, but like how does that play a life, the music part of things play a life in your role now? I think you have a podcast about music. No,
I think
so. Like in what worship, non-worship, CCM, non-CCM, like all that stuff. Like, how do you think the music part of things pairs up with your spiritual journey at this point?
Oh man, like I do a lot of podcasts and I love doing podcasts. I still to this day I really hope that I can become a full-time musician when I grow up, right? Like I'm a dude in my 30s, but I'm like, I hope when I'm a grown up I can just do music full time. You know, so it has, you know, it's still a huge part of my life. Like I still write and record music. I obviously I have a podcast talking about Christian music from the 90s and 2000s. I love talking about music. If I could find a way to pay my mortgage and sustain my family doing something music related, that is my dream. And I learned a ton of stuff just from starting out in youth group and going to school for it. So yeah, I think it's still a big part of my life.
It still persists, and I think that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a through line for you all the way. Well, last question, probably. Overall, just how does your youth group experience contribute to the person you are today?
Oh, a massive amount. Like it is huge. It has shaped me in so many ways, good and bad. You know, like I said before, like I was, you know, I was incredibly shamed multiple times throughout youth group. It definitely played into the whole, like my whole freaks and geeks mentality that I had, like, of myself already. I'll bring up again that I deciphered the entire Dwarvish runic alphabet from a map that Tolkien drew. And I decided to say that to a bunch of people that were really into Ultimate Frisbee.
And you didn't get beat up.
Well, it was because my mom was on staff.
There you go.
You know, but then I did find my place, man. Like, I started getting interested in, like, video production and audio production and playing music. And that ultimately led to, you know, I started a band in high school. I went to school to, like, learn about worship music. I went to a Christian university to, like, learn about music. I did music full time for a long time. I do video stuff now. Like all of this stuff kind of came about because of those experiences, both positive and negative, within youth group. So, like, I think I wouldn't be where I'm at now if it weren't for those experiences.
That's awesome. It works in more ways, different ways than we think it will.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, it's been really cool talking to you. I really enjoy your podcast, Church Jams Now, if people have not figured that out yet.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's just a little plug. Go check it out. It's always great. But, you know, these experiences are so interesting to me, especially when we can kind of just be sincere and authentic about it. We don't have to defend the bad stuff, and we don't have to glorify the good stuff. It's just like, we're adults now, but it's still, like you said, has shaped us.
Yeah.
And I always kind of go back to, like, those your mom, those youth those parents who were helping out, like, they just wanted the spiritual experience to impact our adult lives. It still is, but maybe not in the way they expected.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so this conversation is just showing that off in many, many ways.
Yeah. I mean, thanks again for the free therapy.
Anytime. We can welcome you back if you need more, but I will send you my Venmo.
Okay,
So.
for sure. Yeah, I'm going to pay you guys directly after this.
That's right. So anyway, Kylan, thanks so much for joining us. It was great talking to you, and hopefully we get to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. We hope you enjoyed it. Once again, we want to say thanks to Kylan for joining us. Just a great conversation, a really interesting story, and just great to hear about his youth group experience and kind of the impact it's had on him as an adult. Just great stuff, great stories, super interesting. Thanks so much, Kylan, for being on the show. Go check out not just his Church Jams Now podcast. He's got a whole podcast network that you can find. We'll try and get the link in the show notes, but you can go find his stuff on all the places you can find podcasts. Church Jams Now is kind of the hub of it all. A lot of it revolves around that, but go check out that show. It's a great show if you're interested in Christian music from the 90s and 2000s and even further back, some of it. It's a great show to listen to. So thanks again, Kylan, for joining the show. It was great to have you. Let us know what you thought about this show or any of our other episodes. You can find us on Twitter at the handle @SurvivedYG. We don't tweet a ton, but it is the one piece of social media we do have out there. And you can always email us at isurvivedyouthgroup@gmail.com. And if you're interested in being on the show, let us know. Send us an email. We'd love to hear your story. Again, we've branched out. You don't have to have attended the youth group that we went to. I know that's kind of where the show started, but we've branched out and we're just excited to hear about, different youth group experiences from the 90s and the 2000s. We'd love to connect. We'd love to hear, again, how, like Kylan said, how that youth group experience has impacted your life. We want to hear those sorts of things. And again, whether you've left the faith entirely or at the church you were raised at, that's not as important to us as hearing that story of how you got there is what really, really excites us and what we want to hear. So please subscribe and share the podcast. If you're so inclined, leave a rating or review. If you do enjoy this show, you might also enjoy the other podcast I do. It is a music podcast called the Album Anniversary Podcast. Over the last couple years, I've researched and documented the release date of thousands of albums. Throughout the week, I post about them on social media. I've had a couple different formats on the show, but it's just generally a chance to sit down with somebody and talk about an album that they love and why it's important to them. And again, it's called the Album Anniversary Podcast. The music at the beginning and the end of this show is the instrumental version of the song Positive Charge by the artist Dread Pirate Roberts. Thanks again, and we will talk to you soon.
I thought when you were telling the underwear story, like either you were gonna be smeared with it, or maybe it was like actual ass smell or something, like just something like there could so many ways that would go.
It was like a girl that I had a crush on, but I was like, I was, yeah. No, I know, yeah.
Good.
Like, my mom was like, "Oh, this would be so much fun." I'm like, okay, cool. All right.
That might be our top story.
It's pretty damn close. Like your mom sacrificing you to the extrovert gods to wow the kids.
100%. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. I still feel it. I've tried to talk to my mom about it to this day, and she was just like, "No, it was so much fun."
That's so funny to me.
I'm sorry. That sounds a little bit like something your mom would say, Scott.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
I could totally see your mom saying that.
Absolutely. Be like, what? It was traumatic? How?
Yeah, right. No, it was fun.
Everybody.
It was youth group.
Every kid loves this stuff.
Yep.
Well, you had a lot to say.
Yeah, you can't get music nerds on this podcast because I have found out from a podcast that's from music nerds that has music nerds on it, you can't get less than 3 hours. Like I try so hard on our show. I'm like, all right, we're moving it forward. And then I go into the edit. I'm like, how the fuck is this 3.5 hours long?
Just kept going.
It just is. Yeah, you can't help it.
At one point, I thought this is the least Chaos Goblin I've ever seen.
Right?
Seen Kylan, like super focused, and I was like, wow, he really did think this. Like,
Yeah. No, hey, I can be serious sometimes.
well, now we gotta get Josh and TJ, and we could do the
No,
Church
you
James
need to.
trifecta.
Yes, yes, you should.
Because you guys are, I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things about your show too, is that topics of faith come up. I mean, it's mostly focused on the music, but it is interesting to see. Like, I think your show is a great example of that because it feels like there's 3 different spiritual views going on.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why when Caleb and I started doing this, it's like we had the idea back in the 90s that like everything was going to be the same for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And no matter what those points people are at, like, why did they get there and how? And frankly, I thought it would be a bunch of like theology talk, which great. I can do that all day long, but sometimes it's that, sometimes it's music, sometimes it's family. Like they're all different dynamics of people's journeys.
That's what I think makes this podcast so interesting. And because we've had a lot of conversations about that on Church James Now, of like, there are now like a lot of podcasts that are like deconstruction podcasts.
Yeah.
And, our whole thing is like, we don't want to be that. Like, we just want to talk about music. And I feel like you guys approach it from like a similar angle of like, we just want to like hear your stories and like, we want to talk about it. Like we're, regardless of where you fall. And then that opens up the audience massively because there are so many people that I know that, they're just going to like shit on Christianity and won't listen to it, and vice versa. Or like, they're just like, so it's just a church podcast. But like you guys do also like kind of find that line of like, no, like we just want to talk about this like grown-ups. Like, let's just like talk about this experience, regardless of where you fall. Like, we're here to listen to it. And I love it.
Thank you for supporting Caleb on his podcast endeavor, which has by extension now supported mine.
I so love this podcast. It's so good.
Thank you.
Who did your art, by the way? I'm curious.
Caleb.
Oh, really?
I did that. It's a picture I took a couple years ago of the church we used to go to.
It's so good.
Oh, thanks.
You guys know, like,
Simplistic.
if you Google like youth group 90s, like, y'all are like one of the top results too.
Yeah, if you type our specific name, it really is easy.
No, for sure. But
I haven't done 90s youth group.
Yeah, no, I was trying to figure out. I don't remember what I was doing. I was doing some kind of project, and I
look at
just
that.
Googled like youth group 90s, and you guys are like pretty high up there. So, and especially like in image search, like you guys are like first page, like
Well, yeah, I mean, I just did it, and there's a Relevant magazine article. There's 3 videos, and then there's us.
Yeah,
Relevant magazine. Holy.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Talk about a podcast.
I've also cornered the market on the phrase album anniversary. Oh,
nice.
Damn,
That's rad.
dude.
I don't think I named that podcast as well.
It's okay. We still get for having our podcast called Church James Now. Like, and we have people.
Think it's great.
Well, we have people that would be potential guests that see our name and are like, we're not affiliated with any religious organization. We don't want to do your podcast. I'm like, no, it's just like, it's supposed to invoke like 90s youth group stuff, like church jams now. Like, it's supposed to like feel fun. But we've had
It's funny
so
because
many
you also
people
get the
turn us
flip
down.
side of it. Because
Right.
I saw the comments when Josh posted about it on Facebook, and somebody was like, "Oh, they're swearing on this. They shouldn't have church
dude.
in the title."
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, we get so many like iTunes reviews that are like 2 stars, too much swearing. They say church in the name. This is not a family-friendly podcast. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Oh man. That, and then what was the one guy who was really mad that you had said it was bongos and it wasn't bongos?
Oh yeah,
he was really pissed about that. That was weird too.
I know.
So
it's
weird.
like, listen, I know bongos from congos, from djembes. Like, I know. I started out in hand percussion, which, once again, that is an exclusive for you guys.
I'm so excited for that. Because you said it. I literally, I wrote down, when you said bongos, I was like, bongos? I wrote it down, but then there wasn't a good pause to bring it back up.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a I Survive Youth Group in the 90s exclusive.
Exclusive. Breaking.
Yeah.
We'll get the advertisement ready for that.
Sure.
We've got money for advertising? Awesome.
Podcast device. What the hell?
We've been doing this for a year and still there's moments like that where you're like, podcast device.